Hi, producer surplus is of course in a way related to consumer surplus, but it's a slightly more tricky concept to get your head around. Let's have a look at producer surplus. We'll start with a demand curve and a supply curve. And we have an equilibrium price, P1, and an equilibrium quantity, Q1. Now, listen to this definition for producer surplus. Producer surplus is the difference between what price a supplier is prepared to supply at and the actual market price. You see, here we have a market price of P1, but some suppliers are prepared to supply to this market at lower prices. We know that because we have some supply at even lower prices. We take this price here, it's much lower than P1, but there will be some supply. Some suppliers can see a profit to be made and will supply this market even at this very low price. So they're very happy to see a market price much higher. Indeed, they will be prepared to supply at this price, that's their producer surplus. So, at all prices from here, because no supplier is willing to supply at lower than this price, call it P2, the first supplier willing to step into the market and supply the product is at price P2. But of course the market price is at P1, so that first supplier has a producer surplus of this much, P1, P2. And then all these other suppliers are willing to supply at lower prices. There is a supplier who's only willing to supply their first item at P1. Some suppliers are not prepared to supply at all at P1. We know that because as the price goes up even higher, there's even more supply. Nevertheless, producer surplus is the difference between the price at which a supplier is prepared to supply at and the market price itself. And it's represented by this area, that's the area bordered by the supply curve, the price axis, and the price level. It's this area. It looks here like the reverse of consumer surplus, but be careful because it needn't always be a triangle. If the supply curve had cut from the Q-axis upwards, it actually would have had, it would still be the supply curve, the price axis and the price level, but there would have been a fourth side to this area. Anyway, usually it will be a triangle like this. Now what happens when demand or supply shifts? There will be a change in the producer surplus, of course. Let's imagine what happens if demand changes. Well, if demand falls to D2, then you can see that there is a new equilibrium price where supply cuts demand now. We'll call that P2, we'll get rid of that one. And of course now the new producer surplus is this area. And it's fallen by that area. Likewise, if demand had shifted outwards, the producer surplus would have grown. And of course, if supply changes, let's say that the costs of production fall, more can be supplied, we have S2 now, here is the equilibrium price using D2, and we'll call that P3. Well now, we again look for the supply curve, the price axis, and the price level, and this now represents the new producer surplus. So, whatever shifts, demand or supply shifts, nevertheless, it's always true to say that the producer surplus can be found by looking for the area bordered by the supply curve, the price axis, the price level. Okay, and it's the difference between the price at which suppliers were prepared to supply and the market price itself. That's producer surplus.